There were two massive downpours over London in July 2021. One of them produced 5 times more water than the London sewer network could handle. It completely overwhelmed 1,000 homes, businesses, hospitals, tube stations. I interviewed one elderly man who was in his basement flat when suddenly he noticed water rising around his ankles and then his knees and his waist. And it wasn't just water, it was sewage. He can't open his front door because it's jammed shut by the flood. He was standing with the water coming up to his chin. Luckily, a couple from the flat upstairs rescued him. But I just think it's extraordinary that in the capital of one of the wealthiest nations on the planet, someone might drown in a basement flat just because it rained. There's obviously always been the risk of flooding, whether it's storm surges from the sea crashing over coastlines or rivers bursting their banks. But what we're seeing more of now is what experts call surface water flooding, which is basically when downpours can't drain away. And we are now seeing that the biggest cause of billion-dollar disasters is storms that just dump an immense amount of rain, far too much for cities to handle. And that's because of climate change. Warmer air can hold more moisture. I've looked into the risk to the UK of different kinds of flooding, and I am absolutely appalled at the utter lack of readiness. London, in this particular case, isn't designed to cope with massive downpours. And also there's a patchwork of local authorities. So if rain falls on one borough and runs off into another, whose problem is it? Not enough is joined up. Central government needs to really seize this and realise that lives are at stake. There are massive economic risks. We're in a period of acute danger. The great news is, if we have joined up thinking, there's a great deal we can do to make ourselves safer, to protect ourselves, and actually have a healthier future. One of the simplest things is we've got to make our cities spongier. We've got to make our urban areas more permeable. If we have spongier surfaces on the roads, flower gardens, rain gardens, the more there's the chance for the rain to be absorbed and held back. A lot of it comes down to choices that we as individuals or we as a society want to make. At the moment, the car is king. We're choosing to give over a huge amount of our urban landscape to parking. Well, do we want parking or do we want to be flooded? It's pretty binary. It will be disruptive and people will howl about the cost and the lack of freedom, but to a much greater good. A government estimate is that for every £1 you spend on flood protection, you get an £8 economic benefit because people aren't having to leave their homes and businesses aren't knocked out of action, transport networks aren't ruined for days on end, and by some estimates the benefit is even greater. People can actually make their own properties safer. You can install all kinds of devices that would actually reduce the risk of you being flooded. I think there's an incredible opportunity here for the insurance industry to really enable some positive change, rather than just blithely telling people, we're not going to cover you against flooding. They could say, if you do the following things to make your property more resilient, we'll cover you. Now think what an incentive that would be. And we know it works. There's an amazing example in Colorado. A couple who have a beautiful home and were told that they wouldn't get wildfire insurance unless they carried out a list of measures. So they did it. And a few months later, guess what? A wildfire tore through their valley. But the fire prevention measures worked. What the insurance company had done was enable them to survive. Now, exactly the same can apply to flooding. We need to confront the fact that we've dodged a lot of bullets recently. Near catastrophes can so easily become real catastrophes. We've got to obviously maintain the most intense possible pressure to turn off the fossil fuel source of the problem while recognising we've got to adapt. We've got a bathtub overflowing, we've got to turn the taps off. Of course we do. But at the same time, water's spilling over the sides. So do you just ignore that, or do you get busy with a mop? If you say to someone, this is about sewage in your house, if you can frame it in terms of personal safety or the safety of your home or your family, I think it changes the way people will view this. Less global warming, more personal impact.